Okay, in this video, I am installing the new overhead microwave by Thermomate. And this is their first venture into overhead microwaves, and they sent me one to install it and make a video on it. And it just worked out that my neighbor actually didn't have an overhead microwave like this with a vent on it. So I went ahead and installed it over at his house. And here's a video on how that works. The first part here, I am running the electrical outlet above the microwave. Fishing wire through walls is probably one of my least favorite things to do, so I'm going to go ahead and zip through this part pretty quick and get to the actual installation. All right, so the next step is to unbox this. Now, I did not follow the directions on this part. Typically, you want to cut around the bottom on that black mark there, but because I had it lifted up I had it lifted off the ground already sitting on something, I just went ahead and took it off from the top, and I was able to just rip that off pretty easily. Then from there, I needed to carry it into the house. Now, when I carried it into the house, I made sure that I set the microwave on a towel so it wasn't going to scratch the counter, as you can see here. Once I had it in the house, I went ahead and took off the bracket. Typically with overhead microwaves, the bracket comes installed on the microwave itself, so you have to remove that so you can mount it onto the wall, which is the next step. The next part of this project was to locate the stud within the area that the microwave was going to be mounted. This is a little extra tricky on this project because this is a plaster wall and a stud finder won't work. Now, I had a pretty general idea of where the stud was located from when I cut out the electrical box. Then I just drilled holes so I knew exactly where the stud was located. Once I knew where the stud was, the next step was to measure 16.5 inches down from the top of the cabinet so I would know at what height my bracket needs to be mounted. Now, what I did was I put the bracket in at 16.5 inches and then set the level mark. Now, this project was a little different because the cabinet wasn't exactly level, so I needed to mount my bracket at the same level that the cabinet was, because if not, there would have been an awkward gap at the top. Then once I had that marked out, I mounted the bracket in there, and then I marked where I needed to drill my holes for my butterfly clips. Once I knew where those were at, I came through and drilled a hole with the biggest bit that I had. The biggest bit that I had was 3/8, so I drilled the hole and then I bored it out extra so I could get that butterfly clip in there. The next thing I did was put the bracket back up there and circle the holes that I need to run the butterfly clip through, or what they're calling the toggle bits here. Then I run the bolt through and I tighten in the butterfly just a little bit. I don't want to go too tight because then it won't be able to open up behind the plaster. So when you have a plaster wall, you have to figure that it's a 1/2 inch of plaster and then more for the lath behind it. So you need that bolt to have a lot of exposure so when the toggle or the butterfly goes in there, it can spread out and then you can actually pull the butterfly toggle back through. Now I'm going to mount the bracket here and I'm going to insert the toggle bits into the holes that I've drilled. This is always a little tight, so I went ahead and just pounded those in, and you will be able to hear the toggles open up behind there. Once those were in, then I went ahead and mounted the screw that was going into the studs. Once I was there, I didn't tighten that down all the way, but I got it pretty snug. And then what you have to do with toggle bits is to get the toggle to actually be able to tighten in, you have to pull the bolt back a little bit so it has resistance there behind the wall. So what I do when I'm doing this is I use the bracket, I pull the bracket off the wall a little bit. Again, this is maybe a 1/2 inch or so, and then I start to tighten it down with my drill. That ensures that the toggle itself is latched on and holding, and once these are installed, they are very, very tight, and you don't have to worry about those coming loose. So I got them snug, so then I could still adjust them a little bit to make sure I got this bracket to the level that I needed it. Next step was to use the template so I know where to drill the holes for the microwave's top bolts. This is my least favorite part. I find lining this up to be a very frustrating process, and taping it up there to really add to the frustration. But what I've learned is that if I double check my measurements, it usually comes out right. Now, this was the one mistake I made in the installation of this microwave. In the past, I've only ever installed microwaves that require 2 overhead bolts, but this one required a 3rd overhead bolt. So I had to come back and measure that from the hole on the right, the point where I needed to measure the 3rd hole. Then after that, I needed to drill a hole for the power cord. This is a really important step because that power cord will prevent, if it's not perfect, that power cord will prevent the microwave from getting flush to the top of the cabinet. To do that, I used a much bigger bit, one that I know the end of the microwave electrical cord can get through. Okay, so the next part I brought in the homeowner for so we could actually get this microwave mounted. So when we did this, we slowly carried it over and we made sure that we inserted it in the right spot. Every once in a while, if you're doing this by yourself, it can actually sit on the top of the bracket, not the underhooks, and that can be deceiving, and then it slips down and it becomes a bit of a nightmare. So you always want to avoid that. So I had the homeowner help me. Once we got it mounted in there, we started hand tightening the top bolts, and once those are in, it will just hang there. It does a really good job of holding it in place. Came through with my drill, tightened everything down, not too tight, obviously. Don't want to warp the microwave. Now, one of the big differences between this job and what you might experience is how the part of the cabinet that attaches to the top of the microwave is built. The cabinet front on this was level all the way through. There wasn't a gap at the top. So if your cabinets are newer, there's going to be a gap there, and you're going to have to put a filler in there like what is shown in the picture. Once that was tightened down and ready to go, I plugged it in to make sure there was power and that it powered up. And then I started to get it ready. I started to take all of the shipping plastic off of there and started putting in all of the parts, including the table that spins around. And then after that, the last thing I needed to do was to install the grease filters. This took me a couple tries. Once you actually get them in there, they're pretty easy after the first time, but I kind of struggled the first time. But once they're in there, they're ready to go. And then you need to replace those whenever the manual says. Now, there is a charcoal filter, since this is set up to be a recirculating vent, because they didn't have an external vent out there. That came pre-installed, so I didn't have to worry about that. But you want to make sure that it's in there, that it's mounted properly, if that is how you're going to set the microwave up. If you're going to have the air vent in any other direction, you need to reference the manual to see how to set that up. Here I am trying out the microwave. It works great. The homeowner could not be happier with it. The installation was very easy. And so far, so good. I can't recommend this microwave enough. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and subscribe button. And as always, thanks a lot for watching.